Why do introverts love deep conversations? Why does small talk and gossip just not really appeal to us? And typically, it's not something we have any interest in. That's what we're going to be talking about today on the Introvert Experience. What's up, everybody? This is T. Lee, aka the Introvert Leader, and wanted to talk about this topic today in light of some recent events. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the stand-up comedian Katt Williams. He's had some interviews recently that have gone extremely viral, and there are two interviews that I wanted to really focus on for the topic today, because one of them was very different from the other. And I want to get into that and how it ties into deep conversations versus what I believe a lot of us would consider to be small talk. So before we get into that, just really quick, I wanted to give you all an update on the upcoming book, The Calm Effect. It is definitely getting close. It's getting close, you all. So I'm working on some things on the website. I have a brand new website I'm going to be rolling out here in the next few weeks. So I've been tightening up things on that. Also working on my distribution channels for the audiobook as well as the print book and the ebook, and doing some marketing things and getting some podcasts booked and things like that. So a lot is going on right now. It's a very exciting time, and I really feel like there's going to be a lot of value that fellow introverts will be able to get out of this book as a follow-up to Quiet Voice Fearless Leader. So I am super excited, and I want to thank everybody that's been sending me messages and reaching out to me, asking about the book and offering support. So definitely appreciate that. So with that said, I want to dive right into this. So Katt Williams, for those that aren't familiar, very successful comic, actor, hilarious guy. So, I know we all have different types of humor that we like. Some of you may be familiar with Katt or may not be. Some of you may be familiar with him and may not like him. Some of you may be familiar and, you love his stand-up and what he does. What I will say is that, if nothing else, he is a very interesting character. Like, he's just always been really interesting to me, but more so recently. So there's two interviews, and one interview with ex-NFL star Shannon Sharpe, famous in media, does amazing at what he does. He has a podcast called Club Shay Shay. And then there was recently an interview that Katt was on with Joe Rogan, who, from a podcast standpoint, is like the GOAT, the king, right? So Katt went on to Shannon Sharpe's podcast here about a month or so ago. And I believe that video on YouTube at this point is up to like 60 million views. I mean, this thing went extremely viral, and it was just all that anybody was talking about for the first few weeks that it was out. And people even now are still talking about it. The Joe Rogan interview just released a few days ago as of the release of this episode. And it was so interesting to me how different the interviews were, but it was the exact same person that was being interviewed. So in Shannon's interview with Katt Williams, a lot of the conversation centered around issues that he had with other people, I will say. There was a lot he had to get off of his chest. He was talking about other comedians like Ricky Smiley, Cedric the Entertainer, Steve Harvey. I mean, there was a long list. He touched on Tyler Perry. He made a comment about Diddy. I mean, he was kind of shooting at everybody. Like, there was he had a lot to get off of his chest. And at the same time, it was also, I think, a very interesting interview, because you did get to know a lot more about him. A lot of these people, like celebrities, when we watch movies, we watch stand-up and these various things, you're just seeing, a character, right? You don't really get into that person's personal story, their personal journey. And I did think that in the Shannon interview, Katt really delved a lot into that. I had no idea that he was homeless for a period of time in his life, and some of the struggles that he went through. And it really made his story, for him to be where he is now with multiple Netflix specials and all of this, it made it very interesting to me. So he did get into some of that in the Shannon interview. But in the interview with Joe Rogan, it was completely different. Completely different. And by the way, I'm getting somewhere with all this. I'm going to come back to the introverts and small talk versus deep conversation. It's all going to tie in. So just, be patient with me here. So in the Joe Rogan interview, the interview, there was no discussion about other celebrities. There was no discussion about rumors or gossip or who said what or who had an issue with who. There was literally none of that. The interview was about topics like black holes and who built the ancient pyramids and lost civilizations and Area 51 and aliens and like UFO sightings. I mean, there was almost like no topic. They talked about salt and the importance of it, back in the day. And I mean, there were so many different topics and the conversation went in so many different directions that I was literally glued. Like every minute of that interview, I was glued to it. And it's interesting because with the Shannon interview, again, I kind of described what that was about, right? There was drama, there was conversations about people and who didn't like who and who Katt didn't get along with. And while I'll say it was entertaining in a way, the Joe Rogan interview and the amount of intelligence that Katt showed and Joe and the way that they were going back and forth and talking about these deep, deep topics, it was just so intriguing to me. I couldn't miss a minute of it. I'm probably going to go back and listen to it again pretty soon, actually. So I say all that to say, I think that is a case in point of people that prefer gossip or what I would like to consider more small talk type of topics versus people that prefer deeper conversations. See, I'm the kind of person that if I have a choice between being around one group of people and they're talking about other people, like they're talking about who they don't like, or they're talking about the weather, or they're talking about very what I would consider to be surface level things, I don't so much gravitate to that group. And honestly, I just never have. I've never really been the gossip kind of person. That's never really been my thing. I just believe that people are who they are and they do what they do. I'm not a really big gossip person like that. But when it comes to conversations about, do you think UFOs are real? Like, do you believe in the supernatural and what are your thoughts on the afterlife? I mean, like, there are so many topics that were in that Katt interview with Joe that I've had conversations like that with people because that's where my mind kind of goes. And I think a lot of times as introverts, it's interesting because when we think about the concept of overthinking, I view overthinking from two different standpoints. Overthinking, in one sense, I think can harm us. I think it can harm us from a stance of we think about one particular thing that's going on in our life, and then we are thinking about scenarios and making up scenarios of how things could go wrong, right? So something happened at work, and now we begin to think about, oh my gosh, this happened today. Well, because that happened, what if this other thing happens and that causes this other thing to happen and then I lose my job? Like that's an example of overthinking. Those things may never happen at all, but our mind can go there. There's another point of overthinking as well though, where in the conversation that they were having, they were talking about the supernatural and they were talking about ghosts and all these sort of things. And then as I'm listening to them, my mind starts to think about all kind of other things. I start thinking about, well, I wonder what is going to happen when I pass. And, I'm a Christian. That's my faith. I'm definitely not ashamed to claim that. So I have beliefs about heaven and the afterlife and things like that. But there's just so much that's unknown. Like what actually happens? What is the experience like? Am I going to see my loved ones? Am I not going to see my loved ones? Like there's all of these unanswered questions and conversations that I could sit and talk to a group of people for hours about stuff like that. Like literally. And people think introverts don't talk, or introverts are quiet or have nothing to say. And oftentimes it's just the things people are talking about we're just not interested in. I'll speak for me. A lot of times the things people are talking about, I just have no interest.
How do introverts lead in an extroverted world? A world where the loudest voices and the most social people seem to thrive. Well, there's a secret that any introvert can turn into a superpower. That secret is calmness. To learn how to transform your leadership as an introvert, download the Calm Effect today.
And it doesn't mean that we're mean or rude or antisocial or anything like that. It's just oftentimes, as a society, I think we are very dumbed down. Let's be honest. Let's just be honest. The interview with Shannon on Club Shay Shay and Katt Williams has over 60 million views right now. As of the time of this recording, I'm sure it'll have way more by the time this comes out. The interview with Rogan has around 7 million. Now, granted, the interview with Shannon has been out longer, but it had way more interviews within its first week than the interview with Joe has. And I think it speaks somewhat to our society. I think what it speaks to is the fact that we like gossip. We like entertainment. We love to be entertained. We love to hear someone talk about somebody else. We love drama. As a society, we love these things. But I think specifically for the introvert community, what I've found and observed is that a lot of us prefer the deeper conversations and the deeper connections. And again, I say this all the time, there is no one size fits all, right? So am I saying that there are no introverts that enjoy drama or gossip and none of us ever like any of that stuff? No, I'm not saying that. I mean, there are times where, I enjoy being entertained. There are times that certain conversations, not really gossip ones, but certain conversations that one might deem to be not as deep, I can have a conversation like that. So again, one size doesn't fit all. And it also doesn't mean that just no extrovert is ever deep. Like, I'm not saying that. Like, I have some extroverted friends, extroverted family members, and we'll have some deep conversations. We'll talk about deep topics, So it's not that, introverts are the only people that like to have deep conversations. I'm not saying that either. But in general, I find that to be the case for many of my fellow introverts out there. And some of it too might be the socialization aspect. So with an extroverted person that enjoys people and enjoys being around groups and they get energy off of other people, a lot of being around people and especially new people and making connections, there's a level of small talk involved. I mean, let's just be honest, right? Like, hey, where are you from? How are you? Oh, I know someone from there. Oh, I heard the weather there is like this. I heard this and that. And some of that is like getting to know somebody, right? Which there's nothing wrong, I would say, with getting to know somebody. I mean, I think as humans, connection is good. And, I talk a lot about networking and as introverts, how we can become great networkers. I'm going to touch a lot on that in my follow-up book to The Calm Effect, by the way. So nothing wrong with meeting people, making connections, right? But there's a layer that I consider to be small talk that is a little different from that. I view small talk as more so when you're saying things just to say something, you're making conversation just so that words can be exchanged, just so there's no awkward silence, and really there's no meaning behind the words, and there's really nothing there. Like, that to me is small talk. That, I think, is what a lot of us as introverts have a problem with or, just have an issue with, right? So that could be a big part of it. That could be why people that are more extroverted and they feel that need to really connect with people, the small talk probably doesn't bother them as much because they just view that as, well, this is just part of getting to know somebody. This is part of the connection process. Even if it's fake, even if the conversation or some of the things we're saying, we're just filling the dead air. Hey, I'm going to do that because I want to get to know this person and I feed off of people's energy. So that could be some of it with extroverts. Where I think with introverts, we just won't do it. Like, if somebody is saying something that we don't necessarily have an interest in or want to engage in, we just won't engage. And I think therein lies a lot of the difference. So with that said, I would love to hear what you all think. So What do you think about the difference between deep conversations and small talk? How would you define a deep conversation and how would you define small talk? I will say for me, a deep conversation is any discussion or dialogue that challenges me and causes me to think. That's how I define it for me. If I'm talking to somebody and while I'm talking to them, I am actively forced to think, like I'm challenging myself. Maybe there's some thought, there's something that they said that's making me think and wonder and want to know more about it. That's when I know I'm in a good conversation. When it's a conversation where my brain is not growing at all, we're talking, but I'm not growing. We're just talking, we're conversing back and forth, but there's no growth there. I would view that as not a deep conversation and pretty surface level. But that's my definition. So I would love for you all to reach out to me. Let me know what you think. So shoot me an email to info@terrencelee.com. I would love to know. Let me know, what do you think is a deep conversation versus what is small talk, all right? So I hope you all enjoyed the episode today. I think that for a lot of us introverts, we can relate to being in a conversation and it not being deep and being ready to go or feeling drained or anything like that. But let me know what you think about deep conversations versus small talk, all right? So as always, remember, there's only one you and there's only one life. So make it count. God bless.